We've got a really great panel here. We've talked a lot today about strategic initiatives, about finance transformation at a broader level. We've talked with people on boards, CAOs. Of course, we have one more CAO up here as well with Tim. But this afternoon, we really wanted to get into one specific value stream, right? So we wanted to talk about order to cash and transformation in that space. So we have experts in the area and of course, like adopters of generative AI on the forefront of that. And thank you all for being Clarity customers and for being here with us today. So I'll let everyone introduce themselves quickly, and then we can hop into some of the questions we have for the panel. Irene, you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Irene. I am the Senior Director of Global Revenue at Blackline. I oversee billing, revenue, and variable comp. Been with Blackline for 7 years. Prior to Blackline, I spent 5 years in management consulting, and prior to that, majority of my time has been in the entertainment industry.
Tim Emanuelson, CAO at Cribble. Prior to Cribble, I was at Splunk for 12 years. So saw that go from similar size of what Cribble is now to over 8,000 employees. So it was quite a run.
I'm Vishal. I'm a Senior Director of Revenue at MongoDB. For those of you not familiar with MongoDB, we're a NoSQL database, the database for AI-powered applications, essentially. I've been here 5 years, seen a lot of growth, and I just found out today that I might have been one of the earliest adopters of Clarity, from my tenure before MongoDB at a pre-IPO startup.
That's right, and we appreciate you being a customer for so many years. Well, first off, I wanted to get into a little bit about the current state of AI adoption in specifically order to cash, broader finance teams, but also in order to cash. Would love to hear your take on what are the most pressing challenges today in order to cash, and how do you think AI can help? Why don't we start with Vishal?
Yeah, it's a great question. Nick, order to cash is obviously it's very operational, and when you have very operational processes, you tend to have a lot of manual work that's being done, and not all manual work is going to be as meaningful and impactful for our teams, and where we want to be able to see AI coming in, and I think there is just the perfect opportunity now with generative AI becoming so mainstream, is that you could build these workflows, agentic workflows that sit on top of these generative AI, LLMs, that can now turn traditional software into something more intelligent. So you can actually automate entire sub-processes, and there are just a number of different examples that we've actually seen value today is around just things like document or contract validation, and being able to tie what you have in your contract to what's in your Salesforce systems or CRM that flows into everything else after that. And obviously the information that's getting in that needs to be reviewed today by hand, but now with generative AI, you can actually not only find those contracts that you might have some exceptions, for instance, but also now, how do you now drive further automation by driving resolution of those exceptions as well. So what you do with that is you not only do you streamline operations, but you're also enhancing your sales throughput, because GTM process obviously is reliant upon deal desk, on order management, and now that you're pushing deals through at a much faster, at a higher velocity, it's just great business.
Quicker dissemination of information throughout the different functions in the organization. Yeah. Tim?
Well, let's see. I don't know if there's any more I need to say after Vishal's. Well, I can only reference my time at Splunk, going from a small company to a very large one, and towards the end there, I think we must have had 10 to 15 people in order management just doing manual reviews, and so I wish that we had something like the tools that are out here now to minimize that. And so that's what we're trying to do at Cribble. We're implementing Clarity for that reason. And I wanted to do it at Splunk before I left, but we got acquired by Cisco, and they put the kibosh to that. So, but yeah, everything Vishal said, and especially starting at a small company, you can get all of those tools in, then you can scale much better. And that curve that we were talking about, you can keep at least the finance org to single digit as a percentage of revenue, which would be nice.
Absolutely. Irene?
I think our biggest challenge has been volume. So Blackline is about 660 million in ARR with 4,400 customers. I'm proud to say that we closed the books in 3 days, revenue and billing being on day one. Some of the things we've implemented, and we've been fortunate enough to have the ability to do Clarity as one of our first AI tools back in 2021 to do contract reviews. So we have non-standard terms where we had an entire revenue team reviewing contracts and making sure there are no ASC 606 implications. We've had the ability to automate order to billing. We've had the ability to automate cash application. We use our own tool. Blackline has a cash app functionality. So we're able to have 80 to 85% match rate on a monthly basis from a cash app standpoint. So implementing those little, what feels like little initiatives, but have added up to a significant time saving. When we're on a quarter, it's a 4-day close. On a month end, it's a 3-day close. And we've been really successful in trying to move, how do we get to a day one or a day two, right? Because our CFO on day one wants his numbers. He doesn't want to wait till day 3 or day 2. So the mindset that we're continuing to operate in 2025 is how do we get to a day 0 close where on the last day of the month, I can give a preliminary view of what our revenue is, what our bookings are, because those are very high visible numbers that everybody within the org wants to see.
Awesome. Boggles my mind to hear 1-day close for revenue, having been a revenue accountant before, so that's extremely impressive. Glad you got there. The second question I'll ask is kind of a two-parter. So tell me some of the primary indicators to suggest that your org, specifically order to cash in this instance, is ready for AI adoption. And then is there like a specific entry point that you see as kind of the perfect way to start out with your AI journey? Irene, you want to go first?
I think mindset is really big. Being in the right mindset and having the right team and resources available to you. Having a leadership buy-in is critical to any success. Bite what you can chew. Don't try to do it all, because sometimes trying to do it all will actually end up failing. So I'm big on small wins. That actually is something that motivates people, has significantly motivated my team when they're able to see the results and the recognition. When we implemented Clarity, from our board to our audit committee, the amount of recognition the team has received, knowing that we're out there looking for AI tools to better improve our process and how to automate our close. From things that first come to mind from an automation standpoint, Cash App is big. I think that's probably the most significant part of a close. There's a lot of tools out there that can give you that really high match rate where it can get you to a better place on a day 1 or a day 2 close. Bad debt reserves, that can be painful. You're going through collection notes by customer, trying to figure out why you should reserve a certain invoice or not. So having tools around that actually really helps with trying to get to a quicker close and booking those entries. So I would say Cash App and probably AR reserves are good entry points.
Amazing. Tim?
What was the first question?
Primary indicators
okay.
that the org is ready for AI adoption, and then maybe like a entry point.
Yeah, so when I've been at Cribble just about over a year, and so 6 months in, because of knowing you all, once I got my kind of the dust settled, I guess we're lucky in the fact that when I said, hey, let's look at some AI tools for order management from deal desk all the way through, very good reception. So I think that everybody, and the team before I even got there, has done a great job of getting the right tools in for the close, getting we do a 7-day close, and we're 700 people. So they've done a great job with that. So the acceptance of doing some tools that help make it even more efficient, I don't think there's too much there as far as long as it's obviously within reason on the budget and all that kind of stuff, which you guys are. And so the entry point that we have selected was deal desk, right on through to revenue. because and to what Vishal said, as far as throughput and my prior experience has been that everybody's always like, where's the paper? When are you guys gonna be done? When is it gonna get booked? So if you can sit there and build that process from the very beginning, like we're trying to do at Cribble, then hopefully we avoid all of those headaches as you start to scale up and grow. So we've started with the very beginning, and then and Cash App, look at how we can use it elsewhere too. Collections was another one that, with all the follow-up and having to sit there and send emails and follow up, I'm thinking, okay, there's got to be some way to use AI to automate all of that. If it gets to a certain point, then it just gets sent out, the communication. So lots of opportunities, but that's where we started.
Awesome. Yeah, we often hear, we're not ready yet, but I don't know what that means, right? Like, Michelle, how do you know you're ready?
I think it's, I fully agree with what Irene said. I think there's definitely mindset that's required from an adoption standpoint, because from my experience, we started using, or I guess I first got introduced to the concept of using systems to do contract reviews back in 2018, before ChatGPT was there. So it was largely kind of looking at how do you convert something from unstructured into structured formats so you can do things more efficiently. That was sort of what we were looking out for, and kind of bumped into Clarity at the time, very early, trying to look for. But it was sort of the mindset. And the mindset's not just, from my perspective, I would extend your thought, Irene, it's not just the team or the function. I think it really needs to go all the way up, and having that buy-in at the executive level is huge. But then once you have that, I would go a little bit further in terms of like, how do you identify the leading indicators? When you look at a process and you start seeing that you have a lot of manual, repetitive work that's being done, maybe step back and ask, could this be done differently? Because if the answer from your team is that, well, the only way that we're going to be able to scale is by continuing to add more people at it as volumes get bigger, well, that's one way of approaching it. But what it also means is that maybe you have an area that you could be looking at different ways of doing, AI being one of them, just how do you automate? And a lot of these areas where traditionally software hasn't entered as much is just because, at least from my experience, having been in the field for so long, is that software wasn't able to do things more intelligently. And I think when you start going into more smart software, kind of going back to what you were saying, Tim, about collections, I think that's huge. It's not just so much about sending a follow-up reminder. It's more of being able to interpret what's coming in from your customer, right? And then be able to respond more intelligently and knowing when the handoff needs to happen. But if I were to start extending that, like the way we've thought about this more broadly is to compartmentalize these areas into categories. And I look at document-based workflows. That's sort of where we started. So that's one entry point. 606 was number one. Contract reviews, obviously doing thousands of contracts. No one gets up in the morning being excited to go review a bunch of contracts. So you want to analyze, like as a technical person myself, from an accounting perspective, I love to get in and start analyzing those material rights. I want to break them down. I don't want to go spot them. So that was like one entry point. But as you start kind of getting deeper into it, you go beyond documents. And obviously now with Clarity, what we can do now is the documentation of processes, which is great. It's totally different, but it's still document-based. Then you go further and start looking at, well, what is the other categories that I have? And reconciliations are huge. And by that, I'm not just referring to like account recs, subledger to GL tie-outs. I'm talking reconciling data between systems. And then not just reconciling, but here's where the smartness of the software comes in, is that it can actually identify those potential root causes of what's driving those exceptions, if you were to, and then recommend resolution for it. So now you have your team performing more intelligent work, more impactful work. And so you go from there and you go into email-based workflows, which is where the collections comes in. Deal Desk Copilot would be great. I mean, I love that. I think my team would love that because we spend so much time responding to the same types of questions coming from the sales teams. Well, you probably have AI do that and then know when that handoff needs to happen, right? So there's just a number of different entry points. That's sort of where I'm getting to, is that I don't necessarily feel like that. It started off as like being more review contracts and then be able to OCR the data and then be able to interpret that information. But now there's just so many different avenues within the quote to cash cycle that you could start looking at, where you bring in tools, AI-driven tools that can actually, empower your teams and make things more efficient. Doesn't necessarily have to be, but it just needs to be where you have the most pain and where do you see that sort of low-hanging fruit where you're going to start seeing the ROI quickly. Because if you don't, then I think the mindset would not continue to keep, expanding.
I have a counterpoint. I've met in my 20-year career at least 3 accountants that say they love reading contracts.
No.
So,
I wasn't one
bring
of
it
them.
on board and read the
I
contract.
think it takes one implementation for you to get extremely excited
Exactly.
about the next one.
That's right. Awesome. I would love to shift to the future, right? The future of AI in order to cash. When we first drew up this question, it was like, in 3 to 5 years, what's going to be happening? But AI is moving so fast, right? Generative AI is moving and iterating so fast. I think like the future is here, right? The next 6 to 12 months, how do you see Gen AI kind of impacting the order to cash function beyond what it is today? Where should we start? Who wants to go first?
I can go first.
All right.
I look back to a Clarity Summit that I attended last year. In one of the sessions around AI, there was someone there from Connor Group that basically made a prediction of what he thought it would look like in a year. And one of the things he said was, we're all going to have, in a way, an assistant that's going to help us on a day-to-day basis. And I was sitting there thinking, like, there's just no way. A year later, ChatGPT writes my emails. It responds to, performance review for my team. It articulates it just the right way, so it is HR accepted and it's positive and, not negative, but it has some things to work on. It has transformed so many of our day-to-day in a matter of a year that in the next 6 months, I think there's just so many opportunities for adoption and transformation. If I had to pick, would it be accounting or finance? To be honest, accounting leaders are required to provide information to finance. So finance looks to accounting to be able to transform, to be able to have AI embedded tools, to be able to get the data quick. Data is the source and the most critical aspect of success in any transformation. If your data is not in order, then your transformation and your end result will likely not be where you need it to be. So, I would suggest that we look at those processes that are repetitive, high volume, and are really not bringing much to the table. When I hire somebody, I want an educated person, I want a CPA, I want them to be driven, career-oriented, yet I'm also asking them to review contracts, right? It's not exciting.
Yeah.
How do I retain these people if I'm asking them to do the same thing over and over and over again? And those are the areas that if you embed AI into something that can give you that data, yet you have a human overseeing the process, can you get to the same result quicker, most efficient, and also empower your team to really focus on where their skills are best suited? So those are the areas that I would say is always something I'm looking at. Yeah. What are we doing that's not bringing any value to my team, yet it's critical from a SOX standpoint, but I can also automate without a lot of risk, because risk is really the big part of getting your auditors comfortable with it. So I would say manual things that give you heartburn.
I feel like all of our roles have changed, but specifically like the entry level and senior level for accounting teams, like you're absolutely super powered, right?
Yeah, for sure.
These days, and like in 6 months, I feel like it's going to be even completely different. Tim, what do you think?
A couple things that Irene and Vishal said was the data is so important because you can sit there and extrapolate out. Right now, we're experimenting with Slack on bots that can answer questions for T&E and for purchasing and all these things that people have to take time for. So anything that where somebody's having to respond, especially if it's a Q&A, FAQ type thing, it's like that's got to be out the window and just be totally automated. And somebody talked about that earlier today. The entry point, I was talking about the collections piece as far as just emails, but yeah, the analytics are, that would be huge. And then for the analytics, then it goes back to the data to make sure the data is all good, everything's uniform. And that's where I think people need to start focusing to take most advantage of what comes out in the next 6 to 12 months, right? Because if you have to go backwards and start cleansing all sorts of data, then that's not fun, definitely. So, but and then taking it all the way out to helping with flux analysis and insights into trends that you might not notice as a human. So now 6 to 12 months, that's not going to be something that we're obviously using, but in order to get there, start working on the data cleansing and making sure that's all as pristine as possible.
I love that, being ready to consume what's next, right?
Yeah.
Just being ready to see if it works for you and,
Right.
your organization. Vishal, you think in 6 months we're going to click a button, say close the books, and it's going to be done?
That would be amazing. I won't have a job. No, I think 6 months is a sort of a shorter time frame.
Yeah.
But if I were to kind of look more so to the future, I think the adoption is going to come in not so much. There's definitely going to be pressure or an impetus within companies to now adopt AI. This isn't bottoms up motion. I think it's going to be a top down in companies that are growing faster. And with that, obviously looking at your existing tools that we have that may be AI powered, I think the value add really comes in, and where I'm hoping the future would be in the next 6 to 12 months, maybe even longer, would be what I was referring to before, is just complete agentic workflows. Because that's really where you have sort of like an agent coworker that you would say, because they're able to perform tasks, end to end. You get a lot of value from it. So building those workflows on top of your LLMs, which is probably where traditional software comes in, process automation comes in, but it gives you that sort of output that's going to drive meaningful outcomes, I think is going to be sort of the future of where I think a lot of companies are going in the direction of adopting AI. And then I think there is maybe, if I were to go beyond that, there is most accounting teams, I'm sure there's some of us here in this group who are at accounting firms doing audit work. How do we start seeing from a regulatory standpoint, compliance standpoint, the adoption coming in as well? It's not as mainstream yet, and you still get a lot of questions and skepticism around how much can you trust AI agents, how much can you trust the work that's coming in? And those are valid questions, right? It's new software. I kind of go back to, I'm sure, before I got into the field, the people when the internet came around and things changed, using software to do things, compared to what you were doing before manually, sort of going through the same sort of inflection point and transformation. And I think that sort of transformation is part of what I would expect will happen in the next year or so, as more and more, there's going to be more push from companies overall to move in this direction. So that's going to require the regulatory bodies to move along with that, issue guidance around how you need to be thinking about auditing AI tools. I don't think there's a whole lot out there, which is obviously causing a lot of diversity in practice around how within the same accounting firm you may have different teams looking at things differently. So I think that just creates a lot of inconsistency, makes it harder for corporations, for functions, to be able to use tools that can make things more efficient, but at the same time, kind of keeping that, as you were mentioning, the risk in mind. And how do you build that sort of blended approach where you're trusting the system, but also validating, inspecting what's coming out. But to really drive that, long tail adoption, I think it's going to really have to be an external, adoption from our regulators, from auditors, from a compliance standpoint.
Yeah.
To really help us move in that direction.
Awesome. Well, we're keeping everyone from their refreshments, including us. But maybe one last thing, maybe just like a practical advice. You're all AI adopters, like practical advice for the group here on how they should think about that. Just like one final nugget, and then we can let everyone go.
I'll go
Tim,
first.
you want to go first?
Sorry.
Irene? Yeah, absolutely.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
The biggest thing you can give your teams is the opportunity to play. Give them the opportunity, give them the chance to explore, because as they explore and as they play around, that's where new ideas form and the options to automate comes around. So I think it's critical to just give them the environment to explore, I would say. It might be terrifying, but it really just takes one. And then no one can stop you from there because you see the returns so much quicker.
Yeah, be open to looking at whatever's out there for sure, and making sure that your team has the mindset of being open, and then reinforcing the fact that, look, and I know it's kind of a buzzword now where it's like, well, you want to do more valuable work. Well, that's true though. I mean, as long as you catch it. If you're a behemoth company, then yeah, there's probably some cost cutting involved. But I mean, even as small as Cribble is, the conversation of even doing a little bit of outsourcing on top of talking about AI, you still get that. Am I going to have a job, right? And it's like, no. So you got to just keep reinforcing that, because to let people experiment, be trial and error and everything, it's great. And as long as they don't feel like that they're going to be putting themselves out of a job.
For it somehow, yeah. Absolutely. Vishal?
Yeah, I would kind of extend what you were saying, Tim, and also what you said, Irene, but I would take one step further and say, upskill your team. I think it's coming, transformation, right? And, I think there is fear, obviously, and, that would prevent people from coming up with ideas because they don't want to make themselves, in their minds, that I would be redundant. And a lot of these ideas around where you may have pressure points, an opportunity where you can actually make things more efficient, will not bubble up due to that resistance. But if you were to upskill your team and to help them visualize what their work is going to be going forward and drive that confidence that it's not necessarily going to be a replacement, it probably might slow down hiring, but it certainly would move people into a different phase of work. And that's what we've done pretty extensively where I've been, and that's worked really well. And a lot of the ideas that we get actually come from people that are, really, really close to the process.
Sure.
And they can voice those concerns, like, this is really inefficient, maybe we can do things better. And so when you start having that momentum across the team, and the team's starting to see that their work is improving, and they're doing more meaningful, tangible, impactful work, you're going to see a lot, you're going to see adoption.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, we just started asking, have you tried to use generative AI to solve this problem, right? And people were like, wow, like maybe it wasn't the way they thought it would help, but it helped, right? And so they started opening their eyes to how to use this type of technology. Well, thank you so much for all of your time and all of the insights. It was really fantastic. If anyone has questions for the panel here, they're going to be at the bar with a cocktail in their hands, and we'd love to see you all out there as well. So thanks so much.